on top of the great civilizations of Mesoamerica, another center of civilization emerged in the Andes Mountains. This region was made up of deserts that supported humans because the deserts were cut or are cut with rivers that flow down from the Andes Mountains. So this offers opportunities for agriculture. Also, the west coast of South America provided ample fishing to support the complex civilizations. None of these civilizations developed writing, so historians depend on archaeology to understand them. Some historians argue that Norte Chico, which developed along the central coast of Peru between the years 3000 BCE and 1800 BCE, so around the same time as the civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, constitutes a complex civilization. Little is known about Norte Chico, but we do know that a series of about 25 urban centers emerged in a 30-mile area along the Peruvian coast, and these urban centers were supported by agriculture, which was made possible from meltwater running down the Andes Mountains. So, regardless of whether we consider Norte Chico a complex civilization, we do know that this is one of the few regions in the world where agriculture developed independently. The next group you want to know about are the Chavin, and if we consider the Olmec the mother of all Mesoamerican civilizations, I think it is fair to consider the Chavin as the mother of all Andes civilizations. Chavin civilization is centered in Chavin de Huantar, and this site flourished between the years 800 BCE and 300 BCE. It's located close to present-day Lima, Peru. The Chavin are significant not because they created a massive political empire or anything like that, but because of their religious ideas and their culture that became widespread in the whole Andes region. So today we don't know a lot about the specific meaning behind Chavin rituals and art, but we do know that the religious ideas that emerged in Chavin de Huantar became widespread throughout the Andes region and heavily influenced the civilizations that would come after. And we know this because their architecture, their sculptures, their religious imagery, the stuff that originated in the temples of Chavin de Huantar were widely imitated in the region. So, Chavin de Huantar occupied a strategic location high in the Andes, and it was strategic because it was situated right in the middle of a trade route between the agricultural societies of the west coast of South America and the people of the Amazon rainforest to the east. And the religious cult of the Chavin traveled along the trade route, so in a sense it provided a degree of cultural integration for people in the region. As the religious ideas of the Chavin passed along the trade route, it provided a degree of integration for the people of the Andes, and it would become a major pilgrimage site in the Andes. So after the Chavin provided a degree of cultural unity, there were many civilizations that grew up in the Andes region, and you'll read about some of them in the textbook, like the Moche, the Chimu, the Nazca, the Tiwanaku, and the Wari. Before the Inca were able to consolidate the entire region into one single massive empire. So, with Mesoamerica, there are a few civilizations that are very well known to people today. Certainly everybody's heard of the Maya, and everybody has heard of the Aztecs, and maybe to a lesser extent Teotihuacan. With South America, specifically the Andes region, there's really only one civilization that everybody's heard of before that everybody knows about, and that is the Inca. So around the same time as the Aztecs were building their empire in Mesoamerica, a relatively small community of Quechua-speaking people, known as the Inca, were building the Western Hemisphere's largest imperial state along the spine of the Andes Mountain. The Inca Empire would eventually run almost the entire length of the west coast of South America. So, the Inca Empire was much larger in size than the Aztec Empire. It stretched 2,500 miles along the Andes and was made up of about 10 million people. So, it completely dominated the entire Andes region in the 15th and 16th century, whereas in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs were the dominant group, but there were other powerful groups as well. So, they were just the biggest in Mesoamerica, where the Inca were pretty much the only ones in the Andes. So the Aztecs and the Incas were similar in some ways. Both created large empires in their respective regions, and both groups were led by groups who had been previously relatively obscure. So both the Aztecs and the Incas, the leaders emerged from the margins of classical civilizations. But the empires created by the Incas and the Aztecs were quite different. None of the Andes civilizations developed writing, although some historians are now arguing that quepus, which were knotted cords used to record information like births, deaths, marriages, economic transactions, constitutes a form of writing. Another major difference between the Aztec and the Inca is that the Inca ruled in a much more hands-on kind of way than the Aztec. The Aztec mostly left conquered people alone so long as they paid their taxes to Tenochtitlan. The Aztecs allowed local rulers to continue to rule, and there were really no large-scale efforts by Aztec rulers to assimilate the people living in the conquered territories. When the Inca conquered a new territory, the rulers of that territory had to learn to speak Quechua, which was the language of the Inca. On top of that, the children of conquered political leaders were removed from their homes and moved to Cusco, which was the capital of the Incan Empire. And during their time in Cusco, they learned about Incan culture and how to speak Quechua. Even today, there are about 8 million people living in the former Incan Empire who speak Quechua, and Quechua is the second official language of Peru after Spanish. When the Inca conquered a new territory, they would relocate a lot of the people living in the conquered territory to another part of the empire. So they would move people in large amounts, and they would do this to prevent rebellions from happening. So diluting the population, making them live with unfamiliar people. The Inca would also force conquered people to recognize the major Inca gods as being the supreme gods. But once people recognized the Inca gods, they were still allowed to continue worshipping their local gods. The Inca also took a lot of young girls from families in the empire away from the families when the girls were very young. And these women are known as chosen women, and they were taken from their homes to receive an Incan cultural education. When these girls grew up, they were either given as wives to elite Incan officials, or they became priestesses in temples in the empire, and they were considered to be the wives of the sun god. As far as the Incan Empire goes, we do know that it happened during special ceremonies, but it was nowhere near the scale that it happened with the Aztecs. The Incan economy was completely controlled by the empire, so that means if you lived in the Incan Empire, you had to give some of your labor to the states, and this is known as Mita. Some people labored on huge state farms, some people herded animals, some people mined, some served in the military, but everybody worked for the empire. And in return, to boost people's morale, the empire would provide these elaborate feasts for all their subjects on special occasions. In both Mesoamerica and the Andes region, women had more rights than they did in Eurasian societies. In the Andes, men were considered to be descended from their fathers, and women were considered to be descended from their mothers. In Mesoamerica, children were considered to be descended from both parents. In Aztec culture, there were both male and female priests, and the male priests would do the rituals for men, and the female priests would do the rituals for women. Social roles were clearly defined, so men and women didn't do the same thing, but the things that women did, like bearing children, cooking, weaving clothing, cleaning, these weren't considered to be inferior to the things that men did. So in Aztec culture, for example, the act of sweeping held symbolic importance because it was believed that by sweeping you were purifying the home from evil spirits. In the Andes, there are also parallel religious cults, so different gods for men and women. Men worship the sun and women worship the moon. The Inca ruler, who was all-powerful, ruled jointly with his consort. The male ruler claimed descent from the sun, and the female ruler claimed descent from the moon. And this type of parallel authority didn't just appear at the top of the government. Basically, every male government official had a female counterpart. In terms of Incan agriculture, both men and women participated. Men would break the ground, women would plant, and both would harvest. In terms of military contributions, men would fight directly in battles, and for women, giving birth to children was considered their contribution to war, their type of war. So at the end of the day, it's best to consider the gender equality in the Inca and Aztec empires as relative to Eurasian societies. So it wasn't 100% gender equality, but there was much more gender equality than there were in places like Greece or Egypt or Persia. But at the end of the day, in both Inca and Aztec culture, men occupied the highest positions in politics and religion. Okay, so this is the end of episode 11, The Great American Civilizations. We will be revisiting both the Aztec and the Inca in Unit 3 when we look at the arrival and impact of Europeans on the Americas.